Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we sit down at these microphones, we're taking a stack of articles or maybe a popular business book, and we're looking for productivity hacks or interesting trivia. But today is a little different,
Yeah, quite a bit different, actually.
right? Today we are not just doing a standard review. We are looking at what the source material describes as an autopsy of Western civilization.
And I'll be honest, right out of the gate here, it is not a pretty one. It's messy, it's visceral, and for a lot of people, it's going to be a really tough pill to swallow.
No, it is definitely not for the faint of heart. We are dissecting the claims around the biological and ideological wiring that our source material says is causing the patient to flatline.
Yeah,
If you are a learner who has ever suspected that the game is rigged, maybe you're looking at the state of modern dating or the absolute meat grinder of the family courts or just the economy and thinking, wait a minute, the math isn't adding up here. This deep dive is explicitly for you.
exactly. We are looking at a very specific, very high intensity text today. It's an ebook titled Emotional Reasoning Fails Hard. Women do not think logically, but manipulate emotionally. And that is by Conrad Riker.
Now, before we even crack the seal on this, I need to be crystal clear because, well, the title alone is a frag grenade.
It really is.
And we are here to impartially report on what is in this book. We're not endorsing the viewpoints, but we are unpacking the arguments exactly as the author presents them. Riker doesn't frame this as a self-help book. He describes it as a field manual, a weapon for men of reason who are trying to navigate a world that feels increasingly insane.
Right, he's writing specifically for those interested in the history of our institutions before they were, as he puts it, captured by feminists and Marxists.
So here's the deal. If you're listening to this and you want to support this kind of raw, unfiltered analysis, do us a favor right now and hit that like and subscribe button on your podcast player.
And more importantly, if you want to understand the raw data we're about to cover, you need this book in your digital library. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now.
Seriously, pause the audio if you have to. Search for Emotional Reasoning Fails Hard by Conrad Riker. Buy the ebook to support the author. And you should also follow him at Conrad Riker on Substack. The data we are about to cover is dense and highly controversial, so you'll want the primary source.
Because we're going to be covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, let's give them the roadmap. We are going to look at the author's arguments on the biological basis of female impulsivity. Then we pivot to the economic claims about the welfare state, look at what he calls the gynocentric takeover of our institutions, and finally, how he says you can reclaim civilization.
So it starts with a core thesis that is probably going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. But Riker insists it is the foundational rot of society. He argues that emotional reasoning isn't just a personality quirk.
Right, it's not a stereotype.
Exactly. He claims it is a biological reality, that for a certain demographic, how they feel about a fact is literally processed as more important than the fact itself.
This is the impulsivity versus logic argument he lays out. And he doesn't pull any punches, he jumps right into the financial chaos this creates.
Yeah, he uses this anecdote to set the stage. He describes a woman planning her quote-unquote dream wedding. She is demanding a $50,000 party, the flowers, the venue, the whole Instagram aesthetic.
But the kicker is her debt, right?
Right. She is currently sitting on $30,000 of high-interest credit card debt while demanding this party.
And Riker argues this isn't just about someone being bad with money. He uses this to claim there's a fundamental inability to prioritize mathematical reality over emotional gratification. The emotion of the special day completely overrides the logic of bankrupting their future.
And he brings receipts to back this up. It's not just an isolated Bridezilla story. He cites the Journal of Marriage and Family, pointing to data that shows women file 88% of personal bankruptcies.
Wait, 88%?
88%. It is a staggering majority. And Riker points out the irony here. He claims these are often the same demographics pushing for public money to cover student loans for gender studies degrees.
So he's drawing a contrast between claiming systemic discrimination while, say, sipping a $7 latte that went on a credit card they can't pay off.
Exactly. It's the idea that feelings like I want the wedding or I feel I deserve this degree override the cold reality of not being able to afford it.
But he goes deeper than just spending habits. He actually traces this back to biology. He brings up the luteal phase.
Yeah, so for listeners who might not know, the luteal phase is the part of the menstrual cycle where progesterone spikes. Riker argues that this hormone effectively hijacks the amygdala.
Which is the part of the brain dealing with emotional processing and threat detection.
Right. So he's claiming the hardware is literally being overridden by a software update every month. He cites a Durham University study from 2013 where they found that women rate their current partners 26% less attractive when they are in this fertile window.
So the sudden ick factor isn't random.
According to the source, it is biochemical. Riker shares a story about a friend's wife who threw his collection of vintage records out the window because, and this is a direct quote from the book, Bon Jovi triggers ancestral trauma.
Ancestral trauma from Bon Jovi.
I know. But then 3 days later, once the hormonal storm passes, she is in the kitchen baking apology brownies. And Riker's point is that this instability, when scaled up from a household to a society, becomes incredibly dangerous.
Because you can't build a civilization on foundations that shift every 28 days.
That's his argument. And this brings us to what he calls the hive mind concept. He says if you have a population biologically wired to prioritize emotion, they become highly susceptible to emotional contagion.
This part of the book was fascinating. He points to the TikTok ticks phenomenon.
Yes. In 2021, Johns Hopkins tracked a 3,200% spike in functional neurological disorder visits to the ER. Teenage girls were watching influencers with Tourette-like symptoms, and the claim is their brains literally rewired to mimic them.
And they weren't consciously faking it.
No, Riker calls it Munchausen by internet. It's a herd mentality where online communities become symptom incubators. And he connects this directly to conformity, citing Oxford neuroscientists who found that women on birth control show 40% higher conformity to what he calls woke messaging.
So the argument is that the artificial manipulation of estrogen via the pill literally rewires skepticism. It makes people more likely to just nod along with the mob.
That's the claim. It creates a consensus engine running on emotion, not fact. And he argues that this consensus engine has completely captured our economy.
Which brings us to the economic and legal scam section of the book. Because if the biological argument is a hardware, the economic system is the software. And Riker calls it a gynocentric system.
Gynocentric meaning centered on women. He actually uses the term fiscal vampire.
Yeah, he's definitely not going for subtle there.
No, he's going for what he sees as accuracy. He pulls from IRS data, and the book states that women drive 85% of consumer spending.
Which we hear a lot in marketing, right? The female consumer is queen.
Right, corporations bend over backward for that demographic. But here is the other side of the ledger that Riker says nobody talks about. While driving 85% of the spending, the source claims they pay only 30% of the taxes.
Let me just repeat that so it sinks in. They spend the vast majority of the money floating the economy, but contribute less than a third of the tax revenue.
Exactly, and the book breaks it down further, claiming that single women are a net drain on the taxpayer to the tune of $12,000 yearly, while men are net contributors.
So when people talk about the wage gap,
Riker argues the wage gap isn't real. He jokes that it is actually men subsidizing Sephora hauls. He frames it as a transfer of wealth from the productive male class to the consumption-heavy female demographic enforced by the state.
you work, they spend. And nowhere is that state enforcement more brutal, according to the book, than in the divorce courts.
Yeah, he calls it the divorce industry, a state-sanctioned heist. The stats he provides are pretty grim. Women initiate 70% of divorces, usually citing vague unhappiness. And 97% of alimony recipients are women.
And he ties this to the tender years myth, right?
Yeah.
This legal assumption that the mother is the default parent.
Right. Even though that doctrine is technically outdated in many jurisdictions, Riker argues the bias is completely baked in. Fathers are treated as sperm donors with wallets.
He shares that heartbreaking story of the tech startup owner.
Yeah. The guy was working huge hours to build a future for his family, and the judge gave him 4 hours a month of visitation because he was, quote, too ambitious.
4 hours a month, just because he was working to support the child.
Exactly. And this is where the autopsy gets really dark. He points out that the suicide rate for divorced men is 9 times higher than for married men. Riker frames this as the system sterilizing the productive to feed the parasitic.
It's incredibly heavy. But he uses this to explain why so many men feel like the system is hostile territory. He's saying it's not in your head, it's in the court documents.
And it's in the ideology. Riker traces this institutional rot back to its historical roots, specifically to Marxism, but not just Karl Marx.
This was a massive curveball for me. He actually points the finger at Marx's wife.
Jenny von Westphalen. The claim in the book is that she influenced the rewriting of the Communist Manifesto to swap class struggle for gender whining. The argument is that communism is essentially female-coded groupthink.
Repressed maternal instincts gone wrong.
Precisely. It's treating citizens like infants. The idea that the state is mommy and she will feed you. But to maintain that illusion, Riker argues you have to dismantle logic. You have to capture the education system.
Like the example he gives of the Seattle schools scrapping their gifted programs.
Yeah, because mothers complained that their kids felt othered, so rather than elevating the gifted kids, they just flatten the curve, handicapping the strong so the weak don't feel bad. And it's happening at the highest levels of science, too.
Right, he cites the Harvard physics department,
Ugh.
which is wild because you'd think STEM would be the last stronghold of pure logic.
Not according to Riker. He claims that after implementing diversity mandates, their patent filings dropped by 40%.
That is a tangible loss of innovation. That's not just about feelings. That is bridges collapsing and rockets not flying.
It's the cost of prioritizing feelings over physics. And inside the corporate world, he describes a tactic called the gossip shame rally, or GSR.
GSR.
Yeah, it's how he claims women weaponize social connection like infantry. In the past, men might settle disputes with a duel or a fist fight, and then it was over. But GSR is about reputation destruction. You identify a target, gossip to destroy his standing, shame him publicly, and rally the mob.
The mattress girl hoax is the prime example he gives for this.
Exactly. He calls it a performance piece based on a false accusation that garnered immense support and money. Riker refers to it as the monetization of victimhood, turning tears into crypto.
And you can't deny it's an effective tactic. But the book argues there's a massive cost to society, which brings us to the reproductive warfare section.
Right, because ultimately, if a civilization stops reproducing, it dies. And Riker calls modern feminism a death cult for this exact reason. He looks at birth rates in progressive hubs like San Francisco and South Korea, which are plummeting to 0.78.
That is extinction math. It's way below replacement level.
And he contrasts that with Hungary. Riker points out that Hungary implemented pro-natalist policies, actually paying people to have families and their births boosted by 25%.
But in the West, we have the opposite. We have the child-free influencers.
And Planned Parenthood. Riker does not hold back here. He brings up Margaret Sanger's Negro Project and claims that 79% of clinics target minority neighborhoods.
And he points out the contradiction with the influencers. You have women in their 20s celebrating abortions, and then those same women in their 40s demanding taxpayer-funded IVF.
It's the timeline issue, the attitude of, I don't want kids now, but you need to pay for me to have them later, which leads into his Tinder and margarita anecdote.
Oh man, that one really paints a picture.
The image of a woman sipping a margarita, swiping left on 95% of men on Tinder, while simultaneously demanding chivalry. He calls it the mate suppression theory, that these apps are being used as weapons to filter out the vast majority of men.
And the stats he drops here are just mind-blowing. 63% of men under 30 are single.
Versus only 34% of women. That massive gap implies that the women are all sharing the top tier of men, while the majority of men are completely locked out of the reproductive market.
Creating a generation of sexless, resentful men.
Exactly. Which brings us to the final part of the book, the "so what do we do about it" section. Because Riker isn't just listing complaints. He's not telling guys to just take the black pill and give up.
Right. Chapter 20 is the manual, Reclaiming Western Civilization.
He says the system is rigged, so you have to build parallel structures. He heavily references Jack Donovan's The Way of Men.
The virtues of strength, courage, mastery, and honor.
Yes. Virtues that the modern world tries to pathologize as toxic. Riker says you need to double down on them. Weaponize your masculinity and stop apologizing for it.
And on a practical level, he advocates for building dad networks.
If the family courts are a slaughterhouse, as he claims, you need a network to survive them. Fathers helping fathers evade wrongful restraining orders, sharing legal strategies, pooling resources. You cannot go it alone.
Because just being a married father is an act of rebellion in this climate.
And the stats back him up. Married fathers work 400 more hours a year than single men. Their kids are 44% more likely to graduate college. Fatherhood is the stabilizer.
But Riker is realistic about the pushback. He calls this the red pill reality.
He acknowledges that this book shatters fairy tales. If you think we can just vote our way out of this, or that if we're just nice enough the system will self-correct, he says you are dead wrong.
You cannot build a civilization on coloring books and temper tantrums. That line really stuck with me.
It's the perfect summary of his entire argument. A society governed by emotional reasoning, by the immediate gratification of the toddler mind, cannot sustain infrastructure, it cannot sustain justice, and it cannot sustain a population.
So, getting down to the final verdict here.
Emotional reasoning fails hard is, according to the arguments we've unpacked today, essential reading for its target audience. It is dense, it is aggressive, and it is unapologetic. If you want to understand the logic over what Riker calls feminist mythology, you need to read it.
Absolutely. So here's the hard call to action again. We told you at the start, and we mean it. Go to Amazon, Kindle, or Google Play Books right now.
Buy the book. And the author specifically says that leaving a 5-star review is a way to, quote, nuke the woke mob. It pushes the algorithm and gets this data out there.
And don't forget to follow the author, at Conrad Dreiker, on Substack, Twitter, and YouTube. He is putting this data out there where a lot of others are just too afraid to.
And while you're at it, make sure you have liked and subscribed to the Deep Dive on your podcast app. We are going to keep bringing you these depth dives into sources that the mainstream ignores.
We will leave you with the author's final provocation. Something for you to mull over as you go about your day. Western civilization won't save itself.
Don't just nod along. Act.
See you in the next Deep Dive.